What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Sully's Tech Hub. Today, we're going to be talking about the Pixel 8 Pro long-term review. I've had this phone since launch. It's not quite a year because Google is launching the Pixel 9 Pro early, but I wanted to get this review out before the Pixel 9 Pro came out. I have used Pixels all the way back since they were called Nexus devices, and for those of you that are newer into the smartphone game, you may not know this, but prior to the Pixel phones being called Pixels, they were called Nexuses. Some people don't think they're the same thing, and I guess technically they're not, but they were quite similar. So anyways, what is the Pixel 8 Pro? This is kind of the iPhone of the Android world in the sense that the hardware is made by Google, the software is made by Google. Really, the difference is that Apple is making their own silicon, and for now, Google is having Samsung's foundry produce these chips for them, although they are somewhat customized. You'll find that on paper, they kind of fall behind the chipsets of Snapdragon and Apple, but that doesn't always really translate into real world use, so I don't really care so much about the specs. I care more about how does it actually work. Talking about the design, the Google Pixel 8 Pro has a very rounded design all the way around, so even the screen has these very subtle curves on them. Not so much, it's definitely a flat display, but it kind of has some softer edges. The roundness around the back, you can see the corners are kind of knocked off, and of course it's rounded on the edges as well, so your fingers kind of just fall over the edges. It's a very comfortable phone to hold. I do find this phone to be a lot more comfortable to hold than the Samsungs of the world. I know that they're going into more of an iPhone-like direction with the Pixel 9 Pro. It's kind of pebble-like a little bit. It's very soft on the hands, and it's not too heavy, so it's not really cumbersome to hold it all. The thing you interact with the most is the screen. When the Pixel 8 Pro came out, it was the brightest display, at least in terms of peak brightness, for like a month. There was a whole bevy of other phones that soon followed that had a little bit brighter displays, but just know that if you thought phones in the past were bright enough, the Pixel 8 Pro was brighter than all of them when it first came out, so it is a reasonably bright display. I don't really find myself wishing that it was any brighter. I think it's sufficiently bright. It does have a weird feature where you can turn it all the way to the bottom and then you can hit a button and make it a little bit less. I don't know why that's not just a part of the slider, just make it the next part of the slider, but they didn't do that. Anyways, yeah, it has an extra dim mode. So it does get quite dark. I do think that the Samsung displays got darker, if that matters to you. But I find the brightness is very sufficient on this phone, and you'll be able to see it in broad daylight really easily. Unlocking the device is unique. You do have what Google says is a very secure method of unlocking. So I'm looking at it. It's unlocked. It's unlocked. It's unlocked. So it's very fast. You just turn the phone on, swipe up, and it's up. You do also have a fingerprint scanner, which is optical in nature. It is very reliable, provided that your hands don't have anything on them. The reliability really takes a tumble if your hands are wet, if you have any dirt on them, or if you get a scratch on your hand. It seems that anything can easily throw the fingerprint scanner off, but in combination, having two options that are secure enough to operate banking apps is quite nice. You do have a lot of versatility if you ever find yourself wearing a mask. You have a lot of versatility if you find yourself wearing gloves. So I think options are nice. As far as performance, in day-to-day use, I haven't really noticed much of a difference in really any phone in the last 3 to 4 years. They always are moving upwards in terms of specs, but in terms of what you actually gain, there's not really much change. Navigating UIs, opening applications, scrolling through stuff, it's always really the same. The Pixel is going to hang with pretty much any phone out there. Really where you're going to see the difference is in two key areas. High performance gaming like Genshin Impact or Call of Duty Mobile. You will get better frame rates and better graphics on some other phones. You're also going to see in camera processing, it's not quite as fast as some other phones. The Google phone does do a lot of processing to their photos, and we'll talk about that more in the camera section. But I find that sometimes if you're using the higher megapixel modes like the 50 megapixels, or if you're using the RAW files, this can really slow down how quickly the Google phone can process those files, and there's quite a downtime between frames. Otherwise, It's a very smooth phone. It navigates through the UI just like any other phone, and it's smooth. Additionally, Google's built in some stuff to make the voice features very responsive and very quick on this phone. And I think you will find that that really is the case. The Pixel 8 Pro does have some of the fastest voice dictation, some of the fastest voice features and responses of any phone that you can buy. And any price point, doesn't matter. It's one of the fastest in terms of voice operations. The battery life on this phone, I actually think it's really good. I know a lot of people were saying it wasn't that good. I feel like my experience was a little bit different, just because a lot of people were saying that the Samsung S23 Ultra, when the Pixel first came out, they were saying the S23 Ultra had a better battery life. I really didn't notice that. I never thought the Samsung had a better battery life. I found that they were about the same. Now that could have been that, the Samsung was getting up there in terms of its battery life, in terms of how long I had owned the phone, and maybe the Google phone was brand new. I don't know if that played a part of it, but I never really found that the Pixel had worse battery life than the phone that I had previously, which was the S23 Ultra. I have seen, if you're on Wi-Fi and you've got a reasonable screen brightness, I usually keep my screen brightness pretty high personally. If not max, I'm kind of like Flossie Carter in that way. My screen brightness is almost always max, especially if I'm outside, it's always max. But I've seen 8 hours of screen on time plenty of times. It happens all the time. And I don't really think anyone would complain about 8 hours of screen on time, but that was just my experience. As far as the software, the Pixel 8 Pro is very clean. It's a very simple UI. It's kind of got like lots of like panels. There's lots of like flat elements to this design. And you do have some features that have Google is implementing to make the design of the interface a little bit more uniform. Google is giving this phone a lot of software updates if that matters to you. I typically don't hold a phone for very long, so believe it or not, software updates don't really matter to me personally as a user because I replace my phone so often. But for the purposes of like sustainability and all that stuff, or being able to pass this phone along to someone else or keeping its resale value, it is a good thing. So Google is giving 7 years of updates on this thing, and that's nice. It's very zippy around the UI. It's not nearly as feature rich as something like a Samsung. You do find lots of little nifty AI features that you either will or won't find those cool, but they're in the UI in various places. The speakers on the Pixel 8 Pro are good. They're not quite as loud as what's on the Samsung, but I find the sound a little bit more full. So you get a fuller sound and a little bit less volume. Take that for what you will. I think the iPhone is both louder and equally as full, whereas the Samsung is louder but not as full. And then the Pixel is more full than the Samsung but not as loud. And it is equally as full as the iPhone but not as loud as the iPhone. So hope that really explains that for you. If you really need higher volume for your alarm or something like that, just know that this is not the loudest phone on the market. You can find phones that have a higher volume if waking up in the morning is something you count on, having a really loud set of speakers on your phone. Google has implemented a few unique AI features and little pixel features. You do have things like spam call blocking. You can have call waiting. You can have it transcribe your calls. All that sort of stuff is really neat. There are a lot of AI features baked into the camera, a lot of generative AI stuff, a lot of fixing faces, which I do think that one's really useful. Things that have to do with the audio, features that can remove a lot of noise out of some audio clips that you have. Those are kind of some nice features. I don't really use a whole lot of the AI features on Pixel phones, but I just wanted to acknowledge that they are there. The Google Pixel 8 Pro also has a temperature sensor. That's what this dark little dot here is below the flash. To be honest with you, I've messed with it a couple times. I've never seriously used it, and I don't know if I've ever heard of anyone seriously using it. I think like just holding up your hand is going to give you a better indicator of whether or not something is hot or cold. If you needed an exact temperature, you probably work in something that needs an exact temperature and you have a thermometer of some sort. So I really wish they would kind of save that R&D budget, just kill that feature and put that towards like a better main sensor or something on the camera, bigger battery. I don't know, do something, but no one really cares about the temperature sensor. but it's there. So as far as the camera goes, the camera is a mixed bag. As far as it being on the upper end of things, there are some things that the Pixel 8's camera does better than other phones, but there's a lot of things that it doesn't do quite as well as some others. It is, I think, one of the best video cameras on Android at the moment. They did a lot of work with the video processing coming into the Pixel 8 Pro, and I think it really paid off. I don't really care so much for the video boost feature, but it's also there. It's basically just an HDR feature, in case you're wondering. It is one of the easiest to use cameras. I'll say this: if you're just going to point and shoot and stuff and you want a good result, it is a great camera for that. I think everybody knows that the Pixel 8 tends to win a lot of blind camera tests. When you don't know what photo you're looking at, the Pixel's photos consistently come out to some of the best. So I do think it's really good for that. I don't think it's the most natural look on any smartphone. I also don't think that it has the highest ceiling in terms of hardware and features. Samsung's definitely going to have more features. Sony's going to have more features, a lot more manual controls. I think you find much better hardware on devices like the Vivo X100 Ultra, the Xiaomi 14 Ultra. So that's really going to play into what you do with the phone. The ceiling for the Pixel 8 Pro is not as high as it is on some other phones as far as what it can do with its cameras. It is limited in terms of like certain frame rate features. It doesn't record 4K 120. That's starting to become a little bit more norm on some Android phones. It's really what it's the best at is point and shoot basic photos. It'll be very reliable. It'll be very pleasing. It'll look a little bit processed, but maybe not as processed as some other phones. It's a nice mixed bag. I think most people are really going to enjoy the Pixel camera. If you're a pro user or if you really already know what you're doing with a camera, I think you would be better served by one of the phones that offer a more complete hardware set. But if you don't know what you're doing and you don't want to dig into pro modes, you don't want to dig into manual modes, I do think the Pixel 8 Pro is still, perhaps in that use case, it might still be the best camera out there for you. I have had some quality control issues with my Pixel 8 Pro. When I got my first Pixel 8 Pro, because this is actually not my first, my charging port actually just suddenly stopped working. And I mean, in any way, it wouldn't transfer data, it wouldn't charge. My USB was basically completely killed on the device. And luckily, I have a lot of wireless chargers, both at work and at home. So I was able to kind of tie that over for a little bit, but I eventually asked for a warranty replacement. I did get a warranty replacement. And then they gave me another device that also had a problem. This one has some dead pixels next to the camera. So it kind of has an oblonged sort of punch hole is what it looks like. It looks like it's a double hole. I don't know. It's better than an iPhone, so I don't really mind that much because the iPhone has such a large notch, but it is just kind of annoying that it's got that, rather than just a single hole, it's kind of a double hole, and I'll kind of roll some B-roll up for that. But yeah, really strange issue. I get it that it's a warranty replacement, but it really sucks that they gave me a phone that had issues, but you can't win them all. I didn't have to pay for the replacement or the shipping or anything like that, but I still think they could have probably done a little bit better in terms of choosing what unit that they replaced mine with. Who is this phone really for? What is it the best at? Again, I think it probably has the best voice dictation on any phone, the best voice features. I think this phone is really for someone who wants a very helpful device. So if you're buying for someone elderly or someone who doesn't really know how to use smartphones very much, I think this is a great phone to give them, because you could just tell them, use the voice features when you don't know what to do. And it's really good at that. If you're asking it to place calls, if you're asking it to make reservations, if you're asking it to send texts, it's very capable of doing those tasks. I think it has one of the easiest, friendliest point and shoot cameras, albeit it doesn't have the processing power of some other phones to push through some of those camera needs. And it also doesn't have as high of a ceiling in terms of hardware as some other cameras. It is still one of the most reliable cameras on the market. It definitely has more than adequate battery life. It had one of the brightest displays ever when it first came out, and it is still a sufficiently bright screen. And I think outside of really extreme gaming, you really won't notice any hiccups across the phone. The only thing I've ever noticed in terms of a performance drop is I've recorded some videos in high heat, nearly 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and the phone's preview of the video kept looking like it was dropping frames. I wasn't for sure if it dropped frames, and I deleted those videos and reshot them. So I'm not quite for sure. But I was recording in some high heat outside, and it kept, like, the preview that was on the screen kept showing quite a low, I mean, really low frame rate, like 10 frames a second kind of thing. So I wasn't quite for sure if it was actually recording properly or not. But outside of that one time, it's the only time it's ever happened was on that one day. But this phone does have some heating issues, especially when you're trying to do intensive, video recording is quite heavy on phones. So you do anything intensive and you will see some performance drops. But that's really my total review. We're going to see what comes out with the Pixel 9 Pro. I hope that they don't lean into AI too much, because I just don't really like AI features. I wish they would lean more into hardware, but I don't think that they're going to. And that's probably why I won't be getting the Pixel 9 Pro. Also, just so you guys know, they did not send me a Pixel 9 Pro. So even though I've been using Pixel phones since they were called Nexus phones, don't expect any love on this channel from Google. But maybe next year, if we grow a little bit, we'll get a device from them and we'll be able to test it. But I'll have plenty of camera samples for you guys. I am going to do a completely separate camera review just because I think there's really too much to talk about on this video. But thank you guys for sticking to the end. It really helps if you guys leave a like or a comment, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Thanks again. Bye-bye.